I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which I record this podcast, the land of the Kabi Kabi peoples. I pay my respects to the traditional owners of country and their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today. Hi, Smart Community friends. In this episode of the Smart Community Podcast, I have a wonderful conversation with Eshita Dutia. Eshita is the Principal Smart Places Officer at Cumberland City Council, bringing her background as an architect, planner, and urban designer to the smart city space, with a focus on putting the community first. In this episode, Eshita tells us about actioning Cumberland's Smart Places strategy and action plan, embedding smart technology into placemaking projects to collect data and show impact, including how the team moved away from ad hoc data collection to a streamlined data for places methodology. We talk about combining qualitative feedback, like perceptions of safety surveys, with quantitative data, including footfall, dwell time, and economic spend. We finish our chat discussing the power of simplified data and how small-scale interventions can have significant impacts when documented through data storytelling. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, Eshita. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you, Zoe. How are you?
I am so good. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So let's just jump straight in. And can you please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and your current work and projects?
Yeah, so I am Eshita Dutia. I'm currently the Principal Smart Places Officer at Cumberland City Council. And how I ended up here is I started off as an architect, actually. So I've done my bachelor's in architecture and I worked as an architect for several years overseas before moving to Australia and then, studying Master of Urbanism, getting to become a planner and an urban designer. And then I got into the smart city space while I was at university. So I jumped right into research after university into the smart city space and understanding how smart cities policy can be influenced based on global examples. And that work then led me into this whole smart city space, which I'm doing right now at Cumberland City Council. So I've always been in built environment, and I think that's informed my smart cities work quite a bit. So my smart places work quite a bit because I bring that built environment or that place making or place improvement lens into the whole technology piece. And what I'm doing at Cumberland City Council as the Principal Smart Places Officer is actioning Cumberland Smart Places Strategy and Action Plan, which was endorsed in 2023. And as part of the strategy, we are looking at several different kinds of projects and initiatives, and all of them are with the lens of putting community first. So that's my role now.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's funny how many architects end up in smart city space. And then people that practice, but then they don't, they end up in this kind of urban world. Maybe it's not funny. Maybe that's just quite a direct line a lot of the time.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I just talk to a lot of architects for some reason, but they are in the role of this kind of smart city technology, and I guess that place improvement piece, as you mentioned there as well. So Cumberland have done a lot of exciting work in this space, quite a number of years ago, as well as continuing that into today. So, this is quite a broad question, but we'll start here. So how do you use data visualizations and storytelling in this work that you're doing?
From the organization's perspective, councils and other local government and state government agencies have a lot of static data sets that are used for their annual reports, for, engaging with the community and for some internal reporting as well. So that has always been a part of council's work. But what the Smart Places strategy and action items have done for us is given us the potential to use data for a lot more than just internal reporting and legislative reporting. We've been able to embed smart technology to collect data to show impact for different kinds of projects. to show impact for place improvement, and sort of tie the whole place-making, economic development, and smart places worlds together. So it's interesting where I sit within the team. So I sit within the Environment and Planning Directorate in the team called Places and Economy. And within the Place and Economy team, I work very closely with economic development and with the placemaking team, and bringing all of that together along with technology in the smart places space. The way we're using technology or smart places data more and more in the organization is to sort of embed it into the placemaking or town center upgrade projects, and then use all the data that's collected from embedding all that technology to show impact of that project or show impact of place upgrades in an area to the wider community, to local businesses, and internally to our stakeholders as well.
Yeah, wow. And so there must be a whole range of different mediums that you use to show that as well. So we'll go to that, because I know you have some examples to provide really exciting projects. But let's just talk a little bit about and I guess that intersection between place and like economic development and where you sit, environment is so interesting. And again, I find a lot of smart cities of the smart city crew have ended up in that kind of intersection between environment, place, and economic development, rather than sitting outside on their own, which is great. But I imagine those fields or areas or those specialties are asking for, okay, well, what does this mean for my environment, my place, my economic development piece? So you must have a lot of different issues and problems you're trying to solve with that's potentially the same data. So what are some of those issues and problems you are trying to address and or potentially influence by using this data visualization?
Typically, from what we have seen in the past, is that often when project upgrades happen or when new projects are undertaken, the data that is used to evaluate the impact of the project is almost as an afterthought. It's added as an afterthought after the project is completed. And there's no real plan as to how the data is meant to be used before and after to show a comparison between how the place was before the project was implemented and how it looks like, or how the impact has been of the project after it's been implemented. So it was quite ad hoc before. There was no streamlined process as to how data collection needs to be managed or how the data needs to be represented. So that is the kind of gap that we're trying to plug with our work. That is one of the things we're looking at. The other thing was also from a community engagement perspective, we were looking for ways on closing the loop with our community. So we've asked for all this wonderful community feedback that we've received, and we have used that to inform how the place needs to be shaped in the future. But then how do we communicate what we have done and what impact that has had on the place back to the community, and let them know that whatever you've told us has made this positive impact, and we really wanted to let you know. So that's the second issue or a challenge that we were trying to mitigate. And one of the other things that we were looking to do with data was showing that even small scale interventions can have quite a significant impact. So it's not necessarily the $1 billion or the $1 million projects that can have far-reaching impacts. It's surprising how even small interventions, placemaking interventions, and tactical urbanism can actually have a significant impact on the local economy, on the local footfall, on just people's perception of a place. So that's some of the different ways we're trying to approach with our data storytelling or our data visualization.
Amazing. So you talked about those different audiences there, or who you're kind of trying to communicate with or share information. How do you consider your audience when you're creating these data stories or data visualizations?
That's an interesting question. When we approach our data storytelling or our data visualization process, we are thinking of the user experience of the people who are going to be interacting with this data. So we know that the community is the biggest stakeholder for us, and we need to make our data more accessible and more easily understood by them. But we're also looking at our target audience being researchers or industry or just people outside of the LGA who want to have a look in and understand what we're doing and what impact that's having. So user experience and user testing forms a really big part of the way we showcase our data. And that's a philosophy we have followed with our open data platform and some of the dashboards we've developed to make it as easily accessible and as user-friendly as possible. Because starting with this whole community-first approach of what is the data that is most useful for people? What do we want people to take away from looking at all of this data? And how do we simplify it to the maximum level, which makes it easy for them to interact with the data? because there's a million different ways that we can slice and dice the data. And there is a story that we want to tell the people of a place, but with giving control of data to the people by providing it through an open access platform, which is, data that can be easily downloaded. We want the people to discover for themselves or create their own narrative of a place. So that's what we're looking at doing with all the different target audiences that we are hoping that will see our data.
Yeah, so interesting. So does that then, like the same data, does then it look, do you create different views, I suppose, for your different audiences, or is it more typically that your visualization, I guess it will depend on the project, but maybe like your visualization can actually be used by different audiences and they take what they need from it. So it has, say, quite a lot of different sections in it, or whatever the case is. And then and maybe your audiences have different access to certain things, or maybe they've got a certain view or something like that. What insights can you tell us about that?
What has worked for us and what we think we are looking to do in the future as well is present data in interactive formats. So that lets the community or the viewers of the data choose the way they want to see the data. So you obviously have the option of providing filters. You have the option of, viewing the data as different kinds of data sets or different styles, charts, graphs, donut graphs, pie charts, bar graphs, or, viewing certain layers at a single time and then adding on more layers to see more complex kinds of information. So just making the whole platform or the data dashboards more interactive seems to be working quite well for us. And it's not just about the numerical or the quantitative data. We have seen that using qualitative data such as images or anecdotal evidence from the community also seems to paint a much richer picture of a place. So we are using these different methods of data visualization, but also data collection that is showcased in different ways, so that the community gets a much broader picture and a different perspective from all different angles of a place. So that seems to have worked well. The other thing that we are also looking at is not looking at data from just a historical perspective. So there are some bits of data that are more valuable to the community and to us internally as internal stakeholders in real time or as live data formats, whereas there is some data that is more useful to see patterns and trends from a historical perspective. So we are exploring both kinds of data, live data as well as historical data, to again, paint a richer picture of a place and understand it from many different perspectives.
Yeah, that's a really key point there. The different types of data, not just like, is it environmental data or is it that data, but that historic data versus the real time or near real time data as well, and how both of those can be used in data storytelling, which is interesting. So I wanted to talk about specific examples that you had, but I also wanted to ask you around, you're trying out different things and whether you've got feedback yet about how you're presenting data, either from community or internally within council. So maybe we could start there just to see if you have feedback or whether that's an ongoing process you're still kind of in the weeds with.
Yeah, I think with us, we have started to dip our toes in this whole data space in the last couple of years, and we are going to be on this journey. And the more we are on this journey, the more we're going to learn. But the initial feedback that we've received internally from our teams is that now there is greater interest from many different teams to use the kind of data storytelling or the data visualization techniques that we have done in the past with some of our projects and extend that to the other teams so that they can use that for their own projects as well. And internally within our team also, we've now developed this internal capability on handling and managing data a lot better. So there has been very much a positive feedback from internal stakeholders. As for the community, we are looking at the number of users on our open data platform and seeing how that is maybe increasing or even staying consistent, which was probably a good sign to see how much of an uptake the community has on this whole data platform. But we know that we will get more users and more eyeballs onto our data platform the more dashboards we put on it. So we are working towards having more information on it that will attract more of an audience from different realms and fields who might be interested in the different kinds of data. So that's been sort of the initial feedback.
Yeah, cool. No, thanks so much for sharing that. And I think increasing interest in like what other problems could be solved or what other data could be shown in certain ways. That's really interesting. And I guess from non-data folk, right, people that are working in a whole range of different fields going, oh, hey, it's not just a pretty thing that you did on this project. It's like, oh, no, I see real value in my project having something like that, or, my task or my outcomes looking something like this, so then I can share the information more effectively. Okay, well, let's go to examples now, because I know you have some amazing projects that you've worked on. So where do you want to start with examples?
I think the biggest one and the most impactful one so far that we've undertaken, or rather the most massive undertaking we've done with data, has been on the Guildford Laneway project. And Zoe and your wonderful team were a part of it when we worked with Transport for New South Wales. So that was one of the first projects where we were able to integrate data to such an extent into a project. And what the project actually included was, it was done as part of the Safer Cities Her Way broader program by Transport for New South Wales. And Cumberland's project under that whole program was to revitalize a little laneway in Guildford, which we're calling Guildford Laneway. And the laneway was quite important because it's a major connection between the council car park and the town centre. But for years it had just been neglected, and it was old and dilapidated and dull and grey. And it really didn't seem welcoming enough, and was really unsafe for women and girls especially to be in it. So we went out to the community, co-designed the look of the laneway, or the new makeover of the laneway with them, and tried to understand from the very beginning what the problems of the laneway were. Because it's really hard to tell the community, okay, just what kind of smart technology do you want to see in this laneway, and expect sort of response that you're looking for. So it was much easier for us to identify the problems from a user perspective by asking the local women and girls, what exactly would you like to see in this laneway? So we heard things like, I would like to have some amenity here that will help me stay here longer. Or I would like some new infrastructure here, or new elements here that will make it seem safer. And then we went to a smart technology, or put on a smart technology lens to see how we could integrate technology to actually achieve the solution, or achieve part solutions to some of those problems. So things like having real-time information on the usage of the space, or real-time information on the dwell time of the space, real-time information on the bus timetables and the train timetables around that area. Those were the kind of things that we thought would be quite powerful. What we also did with the co-design and the community engagement sessions is we understood what their perception of safety of the people in that laneway was. So every time you walk into the laneway, what did women and girls especially feel? Did they feel safe? Did they feel unsafe during the day and during the night? And then we did this whole exercise after the project was completed and after all the smart technology and the other amenity was rolled out. We combined all of this qualitative feedback with some numbers and quantitative data that we collected throughout the project. So we collected footfall data, we collected dwell time data before and after the upgrades, we collected some economic spend data and some transaction data from the local economy and the local businesses in that area. And we sort of tried to paint a picture or bring all of these different data sets to build a narrative of the changes that had happened in the place. So that seemed to work out quite well, because we not only managed to show impact of that little laneway makeover, but we were also able to communicate that impact back to the community and have a whole data dashboard for a place, a very place-based data dashboard to complement the physical upgrades that we had done, which the community can see even today.
Yeah, wow. And that information is publicly available. Like you just Google it, right?
Absolutely. Just Google Open Data Hub, Cumberland City Council, and that's the first page that will come up. And we've got a landing page for our Open Data Dashboard, which has some community information on how beautiful our multicultural and diverse community is in Cumberland. And then you also have a place-based Guildford Laneway dashboard that still provides real-time data about the local microclimate in the area, about the dwell time and footfall in the laneway, and some historical data about what the place used to look like before, what it looks like now, what was the economic spend in the area before and just after the upgrades, what did the changes in usage pattern look like just after the upgrades, and there's heaps of data to go and explore.
Yeah, and what I really love about this project is what you were talking about earlier. It has the real-time data, which is at the very top, so you can see what's happening in real time. And then it's got what we call the data stories,
Yes.
which was about that before and after. And it really starkly, clearly shows, without any snake oil or anything, any kind of like embellishing really at all. Definitely no snake oil, but not even any kind of like massive embellishment of like, oh, well, it was this and that. It's very clear and very stark of like what it was like before and what it is like now, and all of those different data sources that you talked about too. And some showed more impact than others, which obviously that's the case. But what I also liked about it is that it does combine not only real-time and historic data, but qualitative and quantitative as well. So you've got your numbers and your stories, which is really cool. And the word cloud is quite powerful in particular, which is 3 words that people used before and 3 words that people use after the upgrades. So you can really see how different it is and what people are saying about it. And I guess also what I like about this project, it started with this problem that we're trying to solve around perceptions of safety. And obviously Cumberland did a whole range of different work and other things in that space. But that was the problem and then you were able to then translate that into what technology that would include. And obviously then was different infrastructure, upgrades, et cetera, and then the data that we wanted to collect as well. And we were able to then prioritize the data based on that problem statement. It wasn't, hey, we want a dashboard for this laneway. What should we put on it? It was this like problem. But what I also, and another thing I really liked about it, and you were talking then, something I hadn't really thought about for a while, is the showcase of this as well. So it's not only showcasing that you get information about Guildford Laneway, but also showcasing what is possible for other spaces and how you can show data in different ways. And then also the potential network scalability effect. Maybe the microclimate in Guildford Lane is it of interest to somebody who's not going there, but then you could see that, oh, well, then if we had a network of this type of data, we could then show that on a different, in a different visualization on a different scale and see the differences based on, the green space in that area or, those type of things. So you can look at trends in different ways. So it's quite like it's one small laneway, but so many different angles you can look at it, which I love.
Yep, and what has been most interesting about the Guildford Laneway project is it acted as a test bed for us in more than one way. So it was obviously a test bed for the physical infrastructure that went in because we were able to trial different forms of technology to get the same kind of data and then compare how those different kinds of technology were giving us either similar data or different data to then find out how that could be scalable to other projects. But what it also helped us do is it helped us to trial the data for places methodology that the state governments rolled out. And through that, we were able to have more of a streamlined approach to how we look at data. So we went through the whole process of data discovery of what was it that the people would really be interested in from a data perspective, or what kind of data was most useful to internal and external stakeholders. And then the whole process of designing what that data looks like or how that data is going to be collected and acquired, then creating the whole dashboard or the back end of the dashboard to see how the data was going to be funneled from all of these pieces of technology onto a public facing dashboard. And then ending with the whole manage and review process of, okay, now that we know that we are going to collect this data and this is how we're going to showcase the data, what forms of technology or what forms of data are going to be ongoing, whereas what forms are just a point in time data. So that whole process was very useful for us to go through because it not only helped us understand or keep sense checks. And that's one of my favorite things on this project, which we did with you, Zoe, and you always bring this up. It's just because we can, should we? And it was those sense checks that really helped us to stay within the problem question or the problem identification that we'd done at the start of the project and not waver too much. Because data is quite tempting sometimes. There are all these different data sets available, and you might think it's easy to just get all of the kinds of data and then figure out what you want to use. But technology costs, and so does data. So it's not always feasible to just get all the different kinds of data sources that are possible and available and then figure out what is actually useful out of all of that. Sometimes you need to be more strategic and decide at the very beginning what is going to be most useful and impactful, and then just stick with it to the end.
Yeah, you're so right. And thanks for bringing up the data places guidance. I will put the link in the show notes too, because we also have the New South Wales government did a case study on this project as well as 2 other projects. And what was super interesting is we applied this data from places methodology on the 3 projects. We all ended up with really different results and visualizations based on what you were saying, Shida, is that we kept with that problem statement because that's what we were trying to solve. And they were similar problem statements, but they were nuanced and they were different based on what the application was or the project was, or those problem statements were slightly different in each way, and what technology was most useful for that. And then the sense check too. Yes, one of my favorite things to say, actually, just because we can, should we, but coming in on that is privacy and ethics and things like that, which we obviously worked on really heavily as well, because that was really important to, us as people, but the government on state, council and state levels, because we know that is something that continues to be increasingly important as we move into this world that's so filled with data about people. But I think one of the key things is we are not collecting data about people. We're collecting data, we'll put in this case, about a place that is useful to people and has a service to people. But we still need to really make sure that the privacy element is key with not just us, but then who we're working with, how it's displayed. And that was some of the conversations we had too throughout the project, which again also creates interesting conversations as we continue to move through this, as AI comes into it and all that type of thing as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. It was very important for us to maintain those, privacy and ethics considerations when we were collecting data, or even when we were showcasing the data. Because as you said, it was not about tracking who was doing what. It's more about using that aggregated data and anonymized data to figure out what usage patterns were happening in that place and how people were now perceiving that place, and how the little interventions that we had done were actually physically impacting or tangibly impacting the space. So it was more about that for us. And what was one of the most impactful things that came out of this data collection process is we actually saw quantitatively how much of an impact the place upgrades had made. So we saw that, post the upgrades, there was almost a 5 to 6 times increase, or a 5 to 6, almost increase in the visitation of people in that place, which was very heartening to see. There was a significant amount of economic spend increase in the local area around the laneway, even though the laneway seems like a really small piece in the whole town center, but it had far-reaching effects or impacts on the economic development of the area. And what was also interesting is that we were trying to look at perceptions of safety and how they had changed. And we found 2 different ways of looking at it. So when we spoke to people before the upgrades and after the upgrades about what their perceptions of safety were, and we compared both those data sets, we found that the proportion of participants who said they felt safe or extremely safe after dark went up by about 5 times. So that was quite a significant number for us. So it went up from about 8% to 59%. Which was a big difference during, feelings of safety after dark. Whereas during the day, the percentage went up from 39% to 92%. So that is quite a big jump for us. And that was one way of looking at how perceptions of safety might have improved in the area. And the other way we looked at it was the footfall after dark. So footfall during the early hours and footfall after dark in the space, which we were able to get data on from sensors and technology that basically just recognizes how many people have passed through the area, and that showed a greater number of people using the space after dark, which was again an indicator for us to come to the conclusion that people were more likely to use the space after dark, which obviously meant that we had maybe successfully improved the perceptions of safety to an extent for the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing with this, what I learned a lot about working on this project and similar projects is that perceptions of safety is such that it's not just necessarily obvious things that will improve that. And then how we measure that also is, I guess there are different ways that we can measure that, which then those layers of data can add validity and rigor and all those type of things, as well as we listen to what the people are saying, but then we also see it in the movements of people and how long people are staying, whether they're staying longer and things like that too. So that was really interesting as we move throughout. And again, I think this project would be a very unique one in that we had so many different layers of intervention and data sources that then we were able to show the whole story of what happened in the space. Okay, well, so is there any other examples you want to share? Otherwise, like, I'm keen to talk about some challenges, and I'm also keen to talk about, maybe we stick with this project for 1 second. I know in this project that the visualization storytelling piece was a key part of the project, but for you, because we kind of added to this project, how important was it to have that data story at the end of it? And that sounds like a leading question, but I want you to answer it as objectively as possible, in the sense of, like, if you didn't have it, what would you have done differently? And do you think it would have still had the same impact that it did have?
It's easy to say in hindsight that, we would have anyways gone this way and we would have all of this wonderful data to showcase it anyhow. But maybe if we didn't have all of this data piece and this data storytelling at the end of the project, we would not have known how much more of an impact it has had. So we would have maybe had some sort of an understanding of it has had some positive impact because of all the good things that the community was telling us. We even did a street activation at the end of the upgrade. So just looking at the footfall there and the positive feedback we had from the visitors there, we might have had some sort of an idea, but we would never have been able to quantify the impacts to such an extent, which I think is quite important for us at Council, because it helps us build a whole business case for future projects. Because the moment you show figures and numbers and data, all of it becomes so much more real than just the community giving us feedback and just having anecdotal evidence of, we heard this and we think people like it. But just those numbers really puts it into perspective and gives it that weight.
Yeah. And having that asset at the end, or call it an asset, I suppose, like of the dashboard, which obviously is public facing, but have you also now been able to use that with decision makers for different talks, like to share has that made it easier then to share the success of the project?
Absolutely, 100%. It has not only helped us show the success of the project and make it a bit more accessible to our internal stakeholders or other departments in Council, but it has also now helped us or given us more of a confidence to add more of these dashboards. So we're looking at different data sets now. We're looking at urban heat, which is one of the major challenges in Western Sydney, especially in Cumberland, and seeing what kind of data we can collect on urban heat, whether it's qualitative and quantitative, and somehow build a data story for that, which will be useful for the community to understand what to do when there's an urban heat event, or which are the places which are cooler than others, where is the local microclimate a bit better during extreme heat events. So that's one of the other tangents that we might be looking at. We have also had interest from other teams who have got some grant-funded projects to see what data can be used to evaluate the before and after impacts of a project. So that's been another area of interest from different departments. One other thing that we are now looking at branching out into is looking at active transport as well as traffic data for more future planning of some of our projects, because, Cumberland's undergoing quite a massive change in terms of upgrades in its town centers. It's very close to the second CBD, which is the city of Parramatta. So we've got all of this growth coming in, and we want to try and understand how we can leverage data to look at the future of Cumberland and do some future planning for our spaces and places.
So lots of different uses there that then, like, applying the kind of data story design that you developed then but it's like starting with different problems to solve. Yeah, that's a good question, actually. From a design perspective, what key elements did you include in your data story? Like, we've already talked a little bit about having our real-time data as well as historic data, but what were really those key success elements that you had in the design?
There were a few, I think. So one of the major considerations for us was we know that not all of our community will probably look at the dashboard on a computer. So it needed to be easily accessible and look pretty much the same on a mobile phone or on a tablet. So it was designed to fit on different kinds of screens and still have the same impact or still provide the same kind of information and be quite widely accessible. So that was one of our considerations. The other consideration, I think, was it's not just bar charts and graphs and numerical data, It's about using imagery and using things like word clouds or before and after photographs of a place superimposed on each other to show how much of an impact the upgrades have had. So it's data storytelling using different modes of data or different kinds of media to showcase what the impacts have been visibly seen in the place. So that was, I think, from a design perspective, quite important. And we also think, or we've looked at quite a few dashboards that have very repetitive looking graphs and charts. So we tried to break it up with some data insights in the form of text. We tried to show some different kinds of charts and graphs. We tried to make it customizable. So if people wanted to see different layers and different assets, they were able to see that. We added maps for information. So it was almost a storyboard of things that you can look at to see what interventions can do to a place. And I think that was quite important for us. But while doing all of this, we ensure that we still stayed true to the whole Cumberland Council branding and what it needs to look like from a council perspective. And it can't look too different from all of our other collateral and our council website and our other digital footprint.
Yeah. I mean, obviously from a branding, regulation perspective or whatever we want to call it, but also do you think that's a professional, a trust thing as well for the community? Because sometimes we go the other way. We don't want it to look like government. But in this case, it was like, oh no, this is still a government website, so that I can trust that the information that I'm getting from here, even though I've got these beautiful images. And I must say that slider that Peklet designed, especially for the project, that really made it where were you able to slide, which seems like pretty whatever, but actually then because that was one of the kind of hero images of being able to slide before and after, that was really powerful. With all of these other, like you said, like annotations on the graphs and changing the shapes of graphs so it doesn't all look the same, keeping, I guess, your mind interested and active as you move through, but also providing, thinking about the design now having really easy to follow, it was quite very easy to follow before and after, and then you could pick out, we're putting the insights in there as well, so you didn't have a massive cognitive load while you're going through. I think was something that was important too.
Yeah, I agree. And with the design, it is simple and it can be as complex as the viewer wants to make it, because they're able to download the data or they're able to create their own graphs and charts off the data. But we wanted to keep it as simple as possible, because sometimes simple data is more powerful than complex data. And people underestimate how powerful data can be when it's simplified to that extent, that it's so easily accessible, understandable by its audience, that you don't really need a whole data analytics brain to understand something. So just simplicity, I think, worked best for us. And also coming at it from different perspectives of, you're using images, you're using graphs and charts, you're using maps. So you're catering to audience who, catering to a wide range of audiences who have different ways of understanding data. So someone might be better at understanding it through graphs. Someone might be more of a visual learner, needs to see images and maps to understand it. So we had something for everyone, I think, on that dashboard.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we're nearly coming to the end. So let's just chat a little bit about challenges. You can use the Guildford Lane as an example, but even just generally, what are the biggest challenges that you had to overcome to create, I guess, the dashboard and then these stories? And I guess maybe they were once off, but maybe they're continuing challenges.
One of the biggest challenges we typically have with projects of this sort is that technology and data have costs associated with them. So budget is always one of the main concerns when we go into projects like this, and that's been an ongoing challenge. But I think we have become much smarter since we've done these data projects in understanding what's the best form of data, or the best or the most economic form of technology that we can use to collect all this data. So that's one way we're looking at addressing that challenge, or we're already working in that space to address that challenge. Some of the other challenges we've had, not just with the Guildford Laneway project, but with other projects that are using data, is choosing the right kind of data. So understanding at the very beginning what the problem statement is and what kind of data or what data sets would be most effective to tell the story of a place, that is one of the challenges. And what we're doing to mitigate some of that is bringing more and more people along the journey with us. So bringing more internal stakeholders, trying to work outside of silos, getting more collaborative inputs from everyone and understanding what data is valuable, and then using that to build the story or build the narrative of a place. It was also the ongoing data management of some of these data sets. So how does council fund this once the grant funding has been completed? So that has been one of the challenges that we are grappling with. We are exploring different ways to fund this internally and keeping it a sustainable ongoing process. But we are quite early on in the piece and we'll probably be figuring out more of this as we go along the way. One thing that helped us quite a bit was working collaboratively, as I've mentioned. There were some challenges, especially around the collection with Guildford Laneway and the economic spend data, because a lot of the economic spend data comes from card transactions and not really from the cash transactions. But Guildford as a place is a cash-based economy predominantly. And we understood that as a sort of a constraint even before we started the project. And we understood this because we work closely with the economic development team. We understood that that was going to be a constraint, and rather than use the figures as gospel themselves, we tried to use the data to understand patterns and trends of change. One of the other things we understood or one of the other challenges that we had was, and we knew this from the beginning, was that we can't really go out to the community and ask them what data would you like to see or what smart technology would you like to see. So the way we did it was we wove it along with the placemaking. So we tried to embed the data into the placemaking so it would almost become business as usual, or it would be so strongly embedded that it wouldn't seem like an overlay on the place. It felt like it belonged in the place. So there's always this challenge of, smart always comes in and swoops in from the top and just becomes this extra element that people are not necessarily on board with. But with this project, I think we managed to overcome the challenge quite a bit by just making data or making smart technology more embedded into the whole process.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful one. And it then shows in the visualization and storytelling part of it too, because you don't just have like the data from the technology, you've got all these data sets in there, as well as the stories from the community as well, with the images of the place. Like, it's not just like, oh, we collected this data, this is what it looks like from, people count or environment. It was integrated throughout the whole story, which I think is powerful. And I also think, as you said a bit earlier, that by creating the data story, like knowing that that was an outcome that the project had, or like that a successful outcome would also have this data story. The process that you had then went through to collect the data, making sure all of that was going to serve the purpose that this outcome of having this data story, that was really powerful. And the collaboration between the different departments, the community, all those type of things as well. The process then was as important as the outcome of actually having the story itself. Well, Eshita, it's been so great to chat with you, and it's been too long between our chats, so we'll have to have another one again soon. But let's finish on any suggestions for listeners to use data storytelling in their own work and life.
I would probably reiterate what I said earlier about the powerful impact of simplifying data. So simplified data is a lot more powerful than just complex data sets that not a lot of people can understand. So try and simplify your data sets, even if they seem very complex. If there's an easy way to showcase this, it will just be more widely understood by people and more widely accepted. Maybe another thing that I can say is don't underestimate the impact of small-scale interventions. So that might seem like a little laneway or a little street or a little small little pocket park or a square that you're upgrading, but don't underestimate how much of an impact it can have on the community. And data can help you tell that story of how much of an impact a small-scale intervention can have. And maybe I would end with saying that it is our hope and our ideal to make data and smart places technology so deeply embedded within our places that it just becomes business as usual. So the more we can involve other teams and collaborate and make it business as usual, the easier it is going to be for smart places to become the norm.
That's a perfect way to end. Thank you, Eshita, so much for so gracefully sharing all of your wisdom and insights with us today, and being part of my PhD and recording this interview with me for the podcast. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Zoe.
I look forward to our next conversation. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
So, bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode and all other episodes at zoeether.com/podcast. That's ZOEEATHER.com/podcast. Have you got a question for me or one of our guests? We'd love to hear from you. Just shoot us an email at hello@mysmart.community. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you follow the podcast wherever you listen and connect with us on LinkedIn too. And hey, ratings and reviews are always welcome. They help more smart humans just like you find the show. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.